Good morning again, everyone. It's Mrs. Wilburn. This is a recording for October 22nd, Tuesday. Since we do not have history class today, you are to watch this recording and listen to it in its entirety. I do have an assignment for you at the very end in the online school about comparing and contrasting this man, Rockefeller, and another man we're going to read about, Morgan. So just listen carefully, learn a little bit about them so that you can complete the activity to show me that you paid attention to the text and participated while I was out of the office. Follow along with me on page 116 or just read silently as I read out loud. A bookkeeper named Rockefeller. In 1858, oil was discovered near Judithville, Pennsylvania. When the news got out, people raced for the hills and gullies of western Pennsylvania. For long, that state was something like California in the gold rush a decade earlier. Trees came down, derricks went up, oil wells caught fire, and black, smelly fumes filled the air. Railroads pushed in, towns sprouted like dandelions and disappeared just as fast. One day, a quiet, unflappable young bookkeeper was sent to this disorganized area to see what was going on. Is the oil business worth investing in? His employers had sent him to find out. No, he told them, and then went on to invest in himself and to become one of the most successful businessmen the world has ever known. His name was John Davis Rockefeller. Rockefeller's Scottish Baptist mother encouraged her sons to work. John raised turkeys and saved $50. When a neighbor asked to borrow the 50, he lent the money and charged $3.50 of interest. It was the lesson he never forgot. Money could be made to earn money. That is what capitalism is all about. Some say John D. Rockefeller was the greatest capitalist who ever lived. Others say he almost destroyed capitalism for everyone else in America. One thing is certain, he soon brought order to that disorderly oil business. He saw the money to be made was in oil refining. In 1863, he was 24. He and a partner bought a small refinery. With his efficient methods, it quickly grew large. Rockefeller began buying his competitors. If you have oil to sell, there are two costs that are important. The cost of the oil and the cost of the transportation that you need to get the oil to the buyers. Because there was competing railroads and because he had quite a bit of oil to ship, Rockefeller made the railroads give him special prices to ship his oil. Actually, what he did was pay the full price like everyone else. Then he got the railroads to give him back half of what he had paid. He did that secretly. It was called a rebate or a kickback, and it wasn't fair. It meant he could charge less for oil than his competitors did. Soon he put most of them out of business, and within 10 years he controlled the nation's oil industry. The oil business was very lucrative, which means there were big profits to be made. Rockefeller's company, Standard Oil, became spectacularly rich. What seems amazing to us today is that all of this happened before the internal combustion engine, which powers automobiles and the other machines that made oil so important in the 20th century. The oil that brought hundreds of millions of dollars to Rockefeller was used mostly to light kerosene lamps in those days before electric light. The more you read about John D. Rockefeller or history in general, the more you'll see how hard it is to make judgments, good and bad, have a way of getting mixed together. You can decide for yourself what to think of him. In the 19th century, many people thought Rockefeller was one of the great villains of all time. His bookkeeper's mind seemed interested only in money and profits, not in people. When he put others out of business, it didn't bother him at all, as long as it made profits for Standard Oil. That company was called the greatest, wisest, and meanest monopoly known to history. Rockefeller soon had vast interests in many businesses, not just oil. And the less he paid his workers, the more efficient the businesses seemed. When some miners tried to form unions, he shut the mines and actually let workers starve rather than pay fair wages. His strike-breaking troops shot and killed workers and their families in mining towns in Colorado. Rockefeller claimed he didn't know what was going on, but he did. At the turn of the century, laws were passed that helped prevent unfair business practices. But until that happened, tycoons like Rockefeller sometimes behaved as if they were kings. John D. Rockefeller had a quiet, dignified manner, but his company acted like a big, tough bully, beating up anyone who tried to fight it. But as I said, making judgments is difficult. Because it was so well organized and managed, Standard Oil helped to make American business grow into world leadership. And it made life better for most people by bringing products to the market at a low price. Like Carnegie, Rockefeller gave away vast sums of money to help others. He didn't have to do that. Many of the business barons of his day kept all that they earned for themselves. Rockefeller lived until 1937. He was 98 when he died. For the last 40 years of his life, he spent much of his time giving his money away. While Carnegie was away 90% of his fortune, giving away 90% of his fortune, Rockefeller, always orderly and precise, gave away exactly half of his. Still, it was an immense half, and created the University of Chicago, the Rockefeller Institute of Medical Research, and a foundation just to give money to worthwhile causes. Now, we're going to read about the other man that I want you to compare and contrast, Morgan. So be paying attention. You can always rewind this recording or have your books out to help you. Okay? Powerful Pierpont. There are so many myths about John Pierpont Morgan that we need to get a few things straight. He was not the richest man in America. People just thought he was. Rockefeller and Carnegie were richer, and he was not the most powerful man in America. There were 2 or 3 men who were equally powerful. He was very rich and very powerful and vain and arrogant too, which means he was very sure of himself. He was a little bit like a regal lion who lords over the whole jungle. The jungle where he was king was the world of business and finance. Morgan was a banker, a money man, and he had the ability to take a confused situation and make it orderly. In the years after the Civil War, the American world of business was very disorderly. J. Pierpont Morgan helped make it efficient. Once, when the U.S. Treasury seemed on the edge of collapse, it didn't have enough gold in reserve to meet its bills. J.P. Morgan loaned the nation $62 million. Another time, the country was facing a financial crisis that might have led to a depression. People were pulling their money out of the banks and the stock market. A leading trust company was about to collapse. When it happened, people would panic. Morgan called the country's leading financiers to have a meeting in his own marble library building. He asked them to lend money to save the trust. Then he locked the library's doors. He sat and played solitaire while the bankers paced and argued. 5 in the morning, when the financiers agreed to do as he wished, Morgan unlocked the doors, let them out. The country was saved from financial disaster. Few people dared disagree with J.P. Morgan. He was a dignified and very imposing man. Besides that, he had integrity. Everyone knew that if Morgan gave his word, you could rely on it. He did not start as a poor boy and work his way to riches. He started at the top. His father was an international banker. Young Pierpont usually got his way. He was smart, with a talent for mathematics and languages. His mind was very orderly. He got a weekly allowance and he kept a record of every penny he spent. When he grew up, he did the same thing. He was sent to schools in the United States and Switzerland and Germany and became a very well-educated man, interested in art and music. He lived in enormous homes, and he had 7 of them. And he also owned a yacht and his own railroad cars. He was an imposing man, vain about his clothes and his looks. His huge bulb-like nose, often red as a strawberry, was bad enough to be considered a medical problem, though he never had a doctor fix it. By the beginning years of the new century, the House of Morgan, the name of JP's bank, could be found in almost every important field of American business. It controlled railroads, shipping, the manufacture of agricultural tools, telephones, telegraphs, electrical power, insurance, and city transportation. Remember, it was J. Pierpont Morgan who bought Andrew Carnegie's steel company. Then he bought huge metal ore reservoirs from John D. Rockefeller and founded the U.S. Steel Corporation, the nation's first billion-dollar corporation. We're going to stop there with the recording. This is your next day's work. Please go into the online school, and under 3.2, you will find an additional assessment called Compare and Contrast, Rockefeller and Morgan. Thank you for listening, and you can always review the recording again or reread those 2 short chapters.